The Diocese of Cleveland in Ohio. The story of the faith in this region began with the labors of Jesuit missionaries. It was nurtured and sustained by charismatic bishops, and carries on today through the devotion and commitment of priests, religious, and lay people. This is the story of the Catholic Dioceses of America, the story of their past and the story of today, the local expression of the universal church. It's also the story of each diocese's mother church, the cathedral. This is The Chair, an exploration of what it means to be a disciple in America. Sitting atop the bluffs on the shores of Lake Erie is the city of Cleveland, Ohio, sea city of the Diocese of Cleveland. Home to nearly 700,000 Catholics, the diocese has a rich Catholic history.
As with many of the newfound territories in America, the missionaries were the first to come and encounter the Native American population. It was the Jesuits who came upon the Huron Indians and were working with them and living with them, helping them survive, but also with the idea of converting them eventually to Catholicism. But what begins to happen as industrialization begins to develop and the building of canals and railroads and factories begin to emerge, Catholics begin to come from Europe. Germans and Irish immigrants who are looking for work, as there is very little back home in Europe.
The Diocese of Cleveland was established in 1847, carved out of the Archdiocese of Cincinnati. And when the diocese was established in 1847, the bishop immediately set his mind to two tasks: establishing a cathedral and establishing a seminary, which says something about the priorities of the church in this period in Catholic history.
Bishop Louis Amadeus Rapp, a priest from France, is appointed the first bishop of the Diocese of Cleveland. Bishop Rapp was born in France and lived there for most of his life, where he spent time working with the Ursuline sisters. Bishop Purcell, the Bishop of Cincinnati, goes on this recognizance mission, if you will, to look for priests. And he happens upon Father Rapp at the time and is very impressed with the work that he's doing and invites him to come to America to work with the German and Irish immigrants. So Father Rapp comes to Ohio into the Diocese of Cincinnati, working as a parish priest, probably really understanding the immigrant experience, being one himself. He becomes very popular and so impressive that eventually becomes the first bishop of the Cleveland Diocese.
2 days after his consecration, Bishop Rapp published his first pastoral letter to his new flock. Now, in this letter, he speaks about the kind of bishop that he wants to be for his people. He writes, "For several years, I have fought in your ranks, shared in your toils, admired your zeal, witnessed with joy the success that crowned your efforts. I desire now more than ever to be regarded as your friend and father rather than your superior, to have a part in your labors, to direct your efforts, to alleviate your cares, to console your sorrows."
So I think it's a very moving, very pastoral, very compassionate letter. He wants to walk with them, almost as Pope Francis has suggested to us, have the smell of the sheep. He is the shepherd, so he will be accompanying them, not standing at the high altar telling them what he's going to be doing or what they should be doing.
Bishop Rapp was very zealous in building up his diocese. He made frequent trips to Europe to invite priests and various other religious orders to start schools, hospitals, and orphanages. On one trip, he visited the congregation that as a young priest he administered to, the Ursuline sisters.
I can imagine there's probably some nostalgia. He knows the quality of the work and the dedication and the spirituality of the Ursuline sisters. So in bringing them back, he recognizes that what he received from them and what he saw them do in his native France, they're very likely going to bring to the community, beginning with education of the children in the area of Cleveland.
We see in the late 19th century the growth of the internal diversity of the Catholic Church in the Diocese of Cleveland with the arrival of Polish and Italian and Hungarian and Czech and other Catholic immigrant groups who all wanted to find a home in the diocese. And the Church's response to that internal diversity was to allow each group to have its own parish. And so we see the multiplication of parishes and schools and Catholic infrastructure as groups wanted to establish their presence and establish a church home for themselves.
As the church in Cleveland moved into the 20th century, the Catholic Church in Cleveland had built itself up with churches, schools, and various ministries of outreach. But by the late 80s and 90s, the economic and demographic changes that swept over the country began to affect the diocese as well.
This area of the country, known as the Rust Belt, began to see an economic downturn. People were fleeing urban areas because the jobs that were once there no longer existed. Prosperity was happening, and as often we find, people are moving out to suburbs, buying bigger houses. So what we start to see is this kind of neglect of a city that was essentially founded by Catholics.
Under the leadership of Bishop Anthony Pilla, who was Bishop of Cleveland from 1980 to 2006, the church began an initiative which encouraged Catholics to become more civically involved in the various cities of the diocese. Bishop Pilla believed that the Catholic Church was paying too heavy a price for having millions of parishioners move out of old industrial cities like Cleveland and Akron. Old parishes and struggling parochial schools, the backbone of Catholic America, were abandoned. But the larger issue for Pilla was that outmigration cuts off the poor from the mainstream of society. He called on the Church of Cleveland to take a prophetic role to overcome poverty, racism, crime, and violence.
Sort of the Church in the City initiative was a call to moral responsibility. Catholics had played an immense role in the development of the city of Cleveland and other towns throughout northeastern Ohio. It really was this call to remind Catholics that they had to maintain a personal and sort of spiritual investment in the city that they had helped shape.
The Church in the City initiative was a successful reminder that the city of Cleveland was in large part built by Catholics. A beautiful example of the Catholic imprint on the city of Cleveland is the diocese mother church, the Cathedral of St. John the Evangelist. This striking Gothic structure was completed in November of 1852, again through the initiative of Bishop Rapp.
Bishop Rapp recognizes the importance of having a seat, having a location that all of his flock in the diocese can share and recognize as something that belongs to them. Obviously, a cathedral, the seat of the bishop himself, is a representation of the church in that particular diocese. But he was also aware of the fact that everybody wanted to belong to this and be a part of this. So he decides to erect the Cathedral Church in Cleveland, the Cathedral of St. John the Evangelist, which stands today and symbolizes what it means to be a Catholic in the Diocese of Cleveland.
As you approach the Cathedral of St. John the Evangelist in Cleveland, you're greeted on either side by Saints Peter and Paul. You can see them holding the keys and the sword, their kind of apostolic accoutrement, and they're kind of encased in little niches on either side of the walkway that leads you up to the main portals of the church. The central portals of the church are surmounted by a beautiful relief sculpture of the crucifixion. You see a large sculpture of Christ on the cross, flanked by John the Evangelist and Mary, his mother. It's an ancient tradition within the church to name church bells after saints or angels. So at this particular cathedral, all 6 of the church bells are named after saints or blesseds. Each of those saints or blesseds are associated with the history of the Catholic Church in the Americas. I think the most striking feature of the church is behind the altar. It's this grand reredos that's made of an intricate web of carved Appalachian oak. There are 32 sculpted figures that make up the rest of the reredos after we see St. John, St. Peter and Paul, and the rest of the 3 evangelists, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. There are 850 pieces that make up the entirety of the reredos. On each side of the transept, there are 2 chapels. One is dedicated to Mary and one to the Sacred Heart. Both feature beautiful stained glass rose windows and, interestingly, murals that surround these rose windows in pointed arches. Behind the ornamental wrought iron gate that adjoins the north transept is the Resurrection Chapel. And within this chapel, the bishops of the diocese are buried. The gate is inscribed with the words Requiescant in pace, meaning rest in peace.
In each cathedral church, we find the bishop's chair, or cathedra, from which we get the name cathedral. The chair in St. John the Evangelist Cathedral represents the apostolic authority of Bishop Edward C. Malesic. Bishop Malesic was installed as the 12th Bishop of Cleveland on Monday, September 14, 2020. And under his guidance, the church here will continue to be a beacon of faith and a source of inspiration and comfort.